Late at night, Jimmy Page sits by himself with guitars observing him from the walls like silent judges. The atmosphere in the room is strained, almost antagonistic. For a moment, it sounds like he's about to name only one band, the one history got wrong. But that delay is a trap, because the truth is darker. There was never a single error. It was four bands pushed aside by ego, timing, and louder names that rewrote the story. And the first name that emerges in Page's mind is one that still makes him uneasy: the Rolling Stones. This one is uncomfortable, and Page knows it. The Stones were never meant to be considered underappreciated. Not with the notoriety, the media attention, and the longevity. They were victorious on paper, but Page saw something festering beneath the legend. A band whose image consumed its musicianship, whose mystique slowly destroyed the work itself. Swagger got louder than sound. Structure became less noteworthy than scandal. Critics began creating myths and stopped paying attention. And Page felt the disparity grow year after year. There was never any shouting about rivalry. It wasn't that cold. Zeppelin sought dominance. Peril, myth was based on accuracy. The Stones chased danger too, but wrapped it in attitude and turmoil. The entire world hailed the posture without questioning the craft. And it disturbed Page because what does it say about history when survival counts more than substance? When is being iconic more important than being precise? When noise replaces depth? Success did not undervalue the Stones. They weren't respected enough. And the question still hangs sharp and unpleasant. Did everyone applaud the band or simply the concept of them? Page is drawn back in time to the beginning of it all by that unsettling thought. Before empires, before mythologies, and before anyone understood what rock should sound like, the recollection becomes sharper at this point. The Yardbirds. This one stings deeper than Page ever admits, and it's Stel Burns. The Yardbirds were innovators before innovation was fashionable, before distortion was tolerated, before risk was rewarded. They transformed blues into something more acerbic and perilous, something the industry lacked a term for at the time. However, they were quietly removed from the narrative rather than being hailed as pioneers. They were actually the laboratory where ideas originated, but history reduced them to a footnote and a starting point for larger stories. During hectic rehearsals that hardly covered the rent, sounds that would later rock stadiums were originally explored in small bars. Page saw those concepts leave under someone else's identity. There was animosity here, not loud, not public, but toxic. A slow, gnawing hatred that came from seeing former bandmates and successors build empires on foundations the Yards poured and were never credited for. The world praised the result but forgot the experiment. And that's where the anxiety resides. Because why were the Yardbirds the ones eliminated if they were so important, so progressive, and so powerful? Because if you listen to the music, you'll hear how expertly it's played. And look, you may have a musician with virtuosity. Page's thoughts shift once more, this time to a band that has been steadily weakened by quiet neglect and comparison. Rather than to another legend, Humble Pie suffered from uninvited comparisons. And the first betrayal was that they were portrayed in every story as being inferior to louder, flashier bands, as though being hungry was a weakness. Each record was evaluated according to criteria that they were never able to fulfill, rules designed to help someone else succeed. What made it worse was how quietly it happened. No scandal, no explosion, just slow erasure, while safer, more marketable acts were hoisted up. Humble night after night, Pie was left to grind on the road, leaking their reality into apartments that were only partially occupied. Page watched it unfold with rising uneasiness. Their tenacity reminded him of something perilous, therefore he respected it. Music before polish, instinct before strategy, and Tego had spooked the industry. A Humble Pie could not be packaged. You couldn't soften them without killing what made them real. They played harder as the walls closed in, toured relentlessly, refused to bend, and still they were pushed aside, quietly replaced by bands that asked less and offered less. Injustice of that nature never goes away. It furs, because it made him address a question he still dislikes. Page never forgot it. When the world concludes that honesty is a disadvantage, what will happen to actual bands? The Beatles. This one borders on heresy, and Page knows it. The Beatles were revered, untouchable, and canonized. Their story became scripture. Their music is unquestionably true. However, Page thought that their shadow grew so big that it engulfed everything in its path. Not by malice, by momentum. Their dominance didn't just shape history, it flattened it. Innovation was credited to them initially, even when ideas were already hanging in the air, waiting to be claimed. Following bands weren't given the opportunity to be heard how they wanted. No matter how unique or risky, they were weighed down, minimized, and written off as copycats. Page observed this happen in real time. He saw journalists reach for the same parallels again and again. He watched nuance lost, risk erased, intricacy reduced to a single story that was unassailable and simple to promote. And the discomfort resides there. Because if the Beatles were actually so far ahead of everyone else, why did so many other brilliant bands fade in their wake? The Beatles weren't underrated. History overcorrected them at the expense of all others. And after that thought becomes clear, Page's mind will have nowhere else to go. No more names, no more comparisons, only the weight of what all of it implies. Page leans back, fingers resting on an antique guitar neck, the wood worn smooth by decades of ambition and frustration. He's lived long enough to see how celebrity actually works, and how easily it lies when history needs a clean story. These food bars weren't underrated by chance. It was inconvenient. They didn't match the narrative. They didn't play safe, while others learned how to package risk and sell it back to the world. They defied formulae, questioned comfort, and stood too close to the fire. They have to pay the price for that. Page has watched talent be ignored while image was rewarded. He has witnessed truth hidden beneath noise, originality crushed by marketing, and depth lost to timing. He now understands that success is rarely determined by who has the strongest fire. The goal is to see who can live the longest without causing discomfort to anyone. And that leaves a question hanging in the air, one that still unsettles him. Was history ever really about greatness? Or just about who learned how to be loud at the right moment? Because the genuine legends, the ones who mattered most, are typically the ones left behind. Page has one final notion that she can't get rid of, darker than everyone else. It enters silently and slowly, like feedback buzzing right before an amplifier lets forth a scream. An insight that taints admiration and transforms it into something more akin to disgust. Because it wasn't an accident if these bands were disregarded, removed, rewritten, or discreetly ignored. It wasn't unlucky. It has nothing to do with timing. The system was operating precisely as intended. A machine that punishes depth, promotes compliance, and crushes anything that defies control or simplification. Page knows this equipment intimately. He used it when necessary, fought it, bargained with it, and survived by being just risky enough to be advantageous. Others weren't so lucky. When their usefulness ended, they were chewed up, depleted of ideas, and thrown away. History, Page has learned, doesn't like resistance. It prefers simple storylines, clean heroes, and repeated legends. It values mythology over truth, appearance over craft, comfort over confrontation. Both bands and challenging inquiries are disliked by it. It doesn't like artists who refuse to soften the edges. People felt uneasy around the bands. Rather than appeasing the audience, they put them to the test. And for that, they were punished quietly, efficiently, permanently. So the last question hangs there now, heavier than any chord Page ever played, sharper than any solo he ever twisted into shape. How many amazing bands were never truly heard? Not because they failed, but because they refused to be convenient.